See, I don't know if we're gonna have the room now. These are a different design hydraulic bump stop to the ones I was originally gonna put in the front. So the original ones were heaps longer, and I was actually just gonna notch it in the frame a little bit, but these ones are gonna make it hard. That's what I thought. It's not going to fit in there. We're going to get too close. I think we're going to be running back to these ideas using the 80 series bump stop, because that just sits in there nice. I could have that anywhere in there, and or even under there. I've moved the wheelbase longer in the front, so we've added about 2 inches. We've pushed the diff forward 2 inches. So because my where the mounts were before, the coilover was going to clash with the Panhard, so I've just had to remake these brackets here. I knew when I was welding them on, I was going to be changing them. I shouldn't have welded them on, but so I've whipped up these little brackets which look kind of nice, and it's gonna be somewhere like that. The diff still has to rotate, so I've got to set my caster angle on the front, but for that I need to put the center in. So I was just seeing how these brackets sort of looked. It isn't ideal having the coilover set that way, because I was worried I might max out that spherical bearing in there. But the reason I wanted to move it heaps forward, I wanted way more clearance here, just for when the wheel tucks up it starts hitting all this inner guard, and I really wanted to keep that plastic. So when the card's at ride height, it's going to look a little funny because the wheel's going to be way forward, but I think I'm just going to have it doesn't look quite right. It doesn't look like the wheel's centered in the guard, which is a big thing for me because it doesn't look sort of factory, but when it flexes, I've still got full turning, and I can keep all the factory plastic so our mud stays out of everywhere. So alright, this should be, that's 9 degrees. We need to come back up. Somewhere around the 3 degrees. We're pretty much at 3 degrees, so I'm going to probably set it there. I will double check it on the pinion angle, but if we got to move it half a degree, it's not going to upset us too much with our coilovers. I just didn't want it to be astronomical out, weld me brackets on, and then when I adjust it later, the coilover might tilt right forward or right back. But we're way in the ballpark. I think my mate's factory LN106 was 2 degrees, and that thing's bog stock, never been messed with. So this should be, if it magnets on, yeah, 81. I know 83 on this is 7 degrees pinion angle, which is 2 degrees caster. So I might change that. I might just put that at 2 degrees then it's right to me mate's original LM106, and therefore later on I can adjust it to where I want. .3. We are starting to get a little bit tight in here, but we still got plenty of clearance from our caliper. Look, almost a finger gap, and from the top of this knuckle. So that's where we're gonna mount them, I think. She's been a bit slack on maintenance, I think, these diffs, but these kingpin bearings in the other side were totally collapsed, so barely bearings. So at least that's good on this side, but I'll have to give that. The best way to deal with grease is put petrol in a spray bottle and it just disintegrates the grease. Actually, it'll clean this up pretty good. Rather than wasting bulk rags, I'll just pour a bit of petrol over it and that'll just dissolve that. So, and then we can cut our brackets off and tack on our new ones, get the coilover in, and just set this side up the same as the other. I didn't have a spray bottle handy, so it looks like we're just wasting rags. There we go, that looks a bit nicer. The other side, if I haven't said it already, had a blown CV when I bought the diffs, and it's actually chopped out a little bit in here, so that's why it was hard to get the other one out, because it damaged the top of the kingpin and the kingpin wouldn't slide out, so I had to sort of hammer it out, but I got it out. This side is nowhere near got the wear the other side has. It's like this has been replaced and the other side was left or something, but at full extension there, or as far down as the axle's ever going to go, and we're about a finger gap clearance there, because we're putting a rose joint on the other end of the Panhard, which we're going to machine up here in a minute, but I think that's going to be plenty of clearance. It's not going to have that much giveness in the rubber bushing to hit at any time. A little brush would have been better for that. But So Dad machined that up for us. Now what we'll do is drill a hole in there so we can do a rosette weld and then weld around the end. Uh-oh. What ended up happening is we put a plug in there, so when we welded it, it didn't distort it, but the plug welded itself in there, a couple spot welds anyway. So we just had to drill that out and then we were able to press it out. So. Where we've put the bend here, I slightly rotated the Panhard just so we have extra room here and we have more room clearing the sump now. So I think that looks a lot better than the old one, because when I made the first one, I didn't have my tyres, so I couldn't set it. So I made as much up travel as I could with the diff to the chassis. But as soon as I got wheels, I didn't want to be chopping the top out the guards too much. Like, I still got to do a little bit, but nowhere near what I was going to be doing before. Like, the whole idea is to look factory at ride height, just with bigger wheels. So, well, as factory as we can. Now, this material here, this 32mm solid, is off my grandpa's shoe polishing machine from 1930s or 1940s or something. Like, you can see little divots around it. That's where each polishing wheel, the grub screw would set in, so each wheel didn't spin on the shaft. So I thought I'd leave them in there because that gives a pretty cool story if anyone was to ever ask. But besides that, it's on a much nicer angle now. We've got the heim joint to take the load off our bushing down here, because as I said earlier, caster changes throughout travel on this, simply because I want the pinion facing the transfer case at all times, being more of an off-road car. But this video was meant to be about bump stops, but after mucking around with me tyres and whatnot off camera, I wanted to pull an inch further out just to give me a bit more clearance up in here. So all up, from a factory Vitara, the diff's moved forward 4 inches. Now all we got to do is work out our bump stops. I'm going to have to probably put in just rubber ones for the minute and work out what I'm going to do later. Hydraulic bump stops I got, they're just not going to fit with the clearances. They'll just become too tight and I don't want them to bind up at any point. And the only other thing, because we've moved forward more, these bottom arms are all right, but this top one you can see is almost maxed out on the thread. So I'll just have to chuck them in the lathe and turn down till I can get my sleeve out, and then I'll get a new bit of tube and lengthen that in there, and I won't need the bend in it anymore, which I'm happy about. We've got the clearance with the floor, so it's kind of redoing a fair few things. But as always, when you do stuff, you always find a better way of doing it. But I'm glad that Panhard's nice and straight now, As you can see, looking down it, it is slightly on the angle, just to clear that diff. In the next one, we'll do our bump stops, we'll get all the steering hooked up, and then this front diff will be ready to get painted up. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.